Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Managing Network Security and Access with Jamf. Thanks for joining us. As everyone's still getting signed in, we'll go over a few housekeeping items. Please think of questions throughout the webinar and direct them to the Q&A section. We'll be answering them throughout and at the end of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded, and we will share the recording with you shortly after the webinar is finished. If we don't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up with you afterward. Reaching out to info@jamf.com will also get you in contact with someone at Jamf quickly. Hello, and welcome to Managing Network Security and Access with Jamf. I'm Mark Buffington, a consulting engineer at Jamf, focused on Apple technologies and how they impact our product and our customers. Today, we're going to cover a number of device management topics related to configuring Apple devices for secure network access. These may range from traditional to new approaches, certificate-based authentication, as well as examples of how these services may be configured using Jamf. So let's look at why we're here and what challenges we're looking to solve. The past year has had a profound impact on how we work, learn, and care, supporting users remotely. Some organizations may have been ready from the start of the pandemic to deploy devices to remote users, while others needed to scramble. It's an immense pressure that's put on IT's shoulders, and to be able to keep your organization's mission going, your people happy, all while balancing security and privacy of devices and user data. In the past, your enterprise network may have been the glue for your users to access the resources and services they need on a day-to-day basis, while also providing a security model that assumes that only authorized users and devices can join, and also that possibly the network traffic might be monitored or routed in a way that's used by your security team to provide guidance of where data is flowing, to provide broader analytics of how data is used. However, over time, you may be migrating more services to the cloud, eliminating the need to access your enterprise network. Or maybe your organization is a startup that never had your own network and on-premise services at all. This is often referred to as a zero trust concept. Different ideas such as identity-based conditional access services can be used to gain access to things using your identity provider to verify that trusted users on trusted devices can access your services. And these challenges are things that IT administrators have been facing for some time now. However, a lot of these changes have accelerated in the past year as more users are remote. As you may be transitioning your security model in your network to a network agnostic model to access resources, there's a number of options for securing access to your services. If you haven't already, check out the Jamf Marketplace for the many partnerships and integrations that can facilitate the changes of these dynamics, including integrations with cloud identity providers, conditional access, and other compliance solutions to integrate with. Speaking of integrations, you may have heard recent Jamf announcements regarding future opportunities for managed network access. Here, we have a press release where Jamf announced our intent to acquire Wandera, a leader in zero trust cloud security and access for mobile devices. Wandera adds zero trust network access, mobile threat defense, and more for users of Apple devices. We're beyond excited about this news. That said, today, we don't have anything new to announce at this time, so please stay tuned. Instead, this webinar continues to focus on traditional network access as even while organizations' security and access policies may evolve and change over time, there's still quite likely a need to be managing the access and security for your own enterprise network for time to come. We're going to focus on the management aspects of configuring secure access and what Jamf provides today, focusing on standards-based technologies and other Apple frameworks that can be managed on your devices. Even if your organization is moving to a cloud-first approach, you're likely going to need this information, or you may be doing some of these practices already. The examples covered today use Jamf Pro as a reference. However, many of the concepts and profile types can also apply to our Jamf School and Jamf Now customers. At Jamf, we hear many questions from customers regarding network access and how to secure it, and how you might try to optimize your deployments, not only for a streamlined IT experience, getting devices out to users as quick as you can, but more importantly, a better end user experience as well. Throughout the session, we'll look at a number of questions we commonly hear and how certain challenges can be solved with Jamf. Let's start with this one. Okay, right away we're going to dive into a little bit on certificates. The question reads, we use certificates for authentication to our enterprise network and VPN. Can we have a true zero-touch deployment to get identity certificates from our CA to our client devices when they're off-network? Whether your organization uses them to streamline authentication to your services or not, certificates come into play in a number of our conversations, as pre-establishing and managing trusted communications between devices is paramount to security. Often, one of the first challenges is where and how devices get an identity certificate in the first place, i.e., it's the classic chicken and egg problem. You need to be on a secured network to reach your certificate server, and yet you need to have a certificate to get on the network in the first place. So how's that going to play out? Beyond the VPNs many of us have been using recently, this is important for your internal enterprise network too, as users return to your schools and workplaces. So to answer the question, do you need to be on-premise to get a certificate to send, or can you do zero-touch? The answer is quite simply yes, you can do zero-touch. But of course, there's more to the story. And I wanted to call this out first, though, especially when certificates are used for authentication. We work with organizations that want to transition to true zero-touch workflows, provisioning from anywhere, but reliance on workflows for direct certificate requests, or even binding computers to Active Directory as a requirement, can add extra steps to prepare devices before sending to users. Let's take a look at a couple certificate deployment workflows to see how these extra steps can be avoided. Here is a direct certificate request example. We have our certificate server, our Jamf Pro server, in this case Jamf Cloud, and our devices. Let's say that our devices and certificate server are all on the same network. With this method, the device first must talk to Jamf Pro. Jamf Pro will then instruct the device where the certificate server is located and what the device needs to provide in order to request a certificate. Then, the device will contact the certificate server, and the certificate server responds with a certificate. But what happens when you have devices outside the network, and they then try to contact the certificate server for the certificate? It's very unlikely that the network and security team will allow this communication from outside the internal network. This is where Jamf Pro has helped organizations deploying certs to both internal and remote devices without compromising security or having certificate servers accessible over the internet. We still have the same players as before, our certificate server still within the internal network, and our Jamf Pro server. This time, let's assume all of our devices are outside the network. With Jamf Pro, it can act as an intermediary for requesting certificates so that the devices only need to talk to Jamf Pro, and Jamf Pro is the only thing talking to the certificate server. Let's see what that communication looks like. The device contacts Jamf Pro then contacts the certificate server, and the certificate server then responds back with the certificate, and Jamf Pro deploys the certificate to the device. Specific details on these certificate workflows can be a whole webinar of itself, and it is, quite honestly. The Managing Certificates with Jamf webinar. If you missed it, please check out this recording on our website. In that session, we cover the basics and best practices for working with certs in Jamf Pro. And while we have that QR code still up, as a reminder, do know that this type of deployment, if it is new to you, we at Jamf can help. Please reach out to your account team and we can have further discussions. Now that we've addressed how you may deliver certificates at least the highest levels, let's get to why you may consider doing so for services like network and VPN access. Start with user experience. Authentication can be seamless and transparent for users. So much so that ideally they shouldn't even know that there's a certificate logging them in. It should just work. From a security perspective, both the Certificate Authority and Jamf Pro can remove or revoke a certificate if needed. This may be useful for offboarding users, as well as for any security response actions from your InfoSec team. Removing or unscoping the certificate profile can allow your organization to give the proper response to incidents, and a new certificate can be deployed once the device is cleared to access your network again. Also, since it's installed by a configuration profile, if MDM management is removed, the certificate is removed along with it. And please note, when certificates are deployed by MDM, the private key for the certificate can't be exported as long as it's configured that way. This way, you know that only the trusted managed device can use that certificate. Here are some common external certificate sources and delivery methods used with Jamf Pro to allow us to proxy request and deliver certificates to Apple devices. The Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol, or SCEP proxy, also known as NDES on Windows, Active Directory Certificate Server, ADCS connector. And while these are commonly used with Windows certificate authorities, SCEP proxy can also be used with other CA types. And we also have integrations with Jamf Pro for other certificate delivery platforms you may use in your organization, such as DigiCert PKI platform and Venafi Trust Protection platform. Check our product documentation or the Jamf Marketplace for more info on those integrations. Okay, now that we have delivered a certificate to the device, how do we use it? Whether your enterprise network uses certificates or credentials, possibly, to authenticate, these are common questions we receive and challenges as people approach projects like this. To start, let's talk about what a secure wireless network is. WPA enterprise networks, often referred to as 802.1x. It's a network authentication standard that is supported by Apple devices. Please note that here on this screen, we're trying to simplify things as much as we can. So pardon me, as I know I'm skipping several steps here on a very technical level. We have many people here that can talk through all of the steps, but I'd like to keep it more simplified for now, because at its basic level, 802.1x is an authenticated access protocol where instead of, say, entering one common password like we have at home networks, network access points will use an authentication server to validate credentials given from the device. Those credentials may be a certificate or credentials that may be a unique username and password. Sometimes these networks may be referred to in your organization based on the vendor's implementation as well. But know that if you are doing authenticated access, it's likely this type of network access. And the authentication server, also referred to as Radius, can verify the identity of clients. And that's often going to be verifying and validating against the same source of truth from your directory that may be linked to your certificates. It's also supported on wired Ethernet connections, including with tvOS deployments. So what are the options? There are a number of authentication types within the EAP, or Extensible Authentication Protocol framework. Each may have their own methods for further securing authentication process from bad actors. I'm not going to get into the details, spelling out these acronyms. That's a whole nother topic and many new things to go through that way. But instead, to understand how your network is set up and therefore how you need to manage configurations with Jamf, we recommend that you work with your network team or your network hardware vendor for further details on your own network design before we dive into how it's configured. The most common protocols we do see on both Mac and iOS devices, however, are PEEP and EEP-TLS. Pardon me for not spelling them out as we go. With PEEP, the user enters their credentials when they join the network from the Wi-Fi menu, and they're prompted to accept the authentication server's certificate and trust for the Wi-Fi connection. Because of this step, this authentication protocol isn't supported at the login window when using a login window plugin such as Jamf Connect Login. With EEP-TLS, a certificate is used to authenticate to the network, stored in either the system keychain or a user's login keychain, accessible once they're logged into the device. For iOS and shared iPad, one certificate is used for all users. There are even combined methods on macOS that some organizations may set, both system and user mode configuration, where a certificate authenticates the system at the login window and startup, then a user enters their credentials, or even a second certificate once logged in as a form of authentication. Again, there are many ways to have this set up. And needless to say, there can be many methods, configurations, and for best success, it comes down to teamwork. Multiple teams need to partner together. You may wear all of these hats as well, making that learning curve potentially steeper as well. But please know that we at Jamf are here to help, and you can reach out to help navigate the requirements and configurations for your environment. I do want to take a quick look at an example profile for 8021X, however. This is really because it's not just about getting a certificate to a device and saying, Wi-Fi profile, go connect to this network. Apple devices need explicit instructions that tell it to use a specific certificate, a specific chain of trust, and even which certificate will it use and expect when it's attempting to do the authentication in the first place. And all of these things generally need to be bundled into the same configuration profile so they're sharing their relationship with each other. In this example, I've got an EEP-TLS, the certificate-based method, as the example. And in the profile, there's one network payload and two certificate payloads configured. In the first certificate payload shown here, I have a root CA certificate for the server that issued my identity certificate to log in with. In the other certificate payload, I have an identity certificate from the Jamf ADCS connector, and it's defined to use certain attributes about the user that's assigned to the computer in Jamf Pro. Note, this computer is not bound to Active Directory, but it is leveraging the same directory attributes for the user as to how the certificate will be presented for authentication. This will give the certificate the proper subject and subject alternative names needed by my network team in this example. Next up is the network payload with the correct enterprise configuration set to use the TLS-based authentication. Within the network payload, I'm able to select the identity certificate configured previously and also define which certificates may be used and presented by the authentication, again, also known as Radius server. Here's an important note. Even if the certificate from your network authentication server in Radius is natively trusted on your Apple devices, you'll need to add the certificate common name into the profile of the certificate that's presented by that authentication service. This does support wildcard values as well if you have multiple Radius servers. This way, the OS knows that it needs to trust and use the specific certificate to initiate the 802.1x auth. For credential-based PEEP 802.1x, the other type we mentioned before, the profile would look very similar to the one in this example. However, would choose PEEP instead of TLS and leave the username and password blank. Please note that the trust settings in the example on the screen here with the certificate common name also applies to that of the PEEP method of authentication as well. That may have been only scratching the surface of what's possible with this network authentication, and it may have also been too much information for your needs as well. Simplification may have missed some details unique to your environment. For more information, please consult Apple's deployment reference guides, speak to your support and account teams at Jamf as you navigate some of this journey. There's a lot of different ways to make this work, and we'd like to get you connected in the way that's most secure with your environment and your needs. Next up, let's look at remote network access with VPN or virtual private networks. Here's a question. We want to enable remote users to access resources on our enterprise network, but don't want all of our users' network traffic to flow through our VPN. We also don't want to burden users with sign-in fatigue to sign in and out frequently. What options do we have? There are many types of VPN clients, some of which work natively within iOS and macOS, configured by profiles, and some that rely on an application to be delivered and controlled with management. We won't go into all the details here, as many are going to be vendor-specific as to how you deploy and configure them. A common element, though, that's shared between enterprise wireless networks and VPNs is similar authentication protocols as 802.1x, be it account or certificate-based authentication as well, and other factors. And to the question of how to segment that network traffic, there are a number of options natively built into macOS and iOS. Firstly, your vendor-supported VPN system and applications may let you simply configure this on their consoles. For direct, standards-based VPN configurations on Apple devices, there are also on-demand rules that can be set, triggering VPN connections to only route the needed traffic through your VPN, leaving other non-enterprise network traffic going through a device's regular internet connection. When paired with certificate-based authentication, again, this can make an ideal end-user experience while meeting your needs in your organization. Here are a few examples of on-demand rules. Some are app-based. Per app VPN on iOS, for example, app to per app VPN on macOS. Both of those are VPN types that can be defined with iOS in Jamf Pro. You would do that from your app record. And with macOS per app VPN, that would be with a unique config profile. But the results are similar, where you determine a specific app or apps that need to route traffic through your VPN. Other VPN types have a number of on-demand rules to determine when your VPN should or shouldn't be activated. Those could include host names that you're trying to access, what network you're on, what the current domain name server or DNS domain is, and other network interface types as well. And the reason that these on-demand rules can be powerful is that they can turn it on as needed, but they can also, on the flip side, not turn on the VPN. For example, you wouldn't want your VPN to start routing network traffic when you're already on site on your enterprise network. Again, working with your VPN vendor and Jamf can help get a wide range of options set for your deployment needs. And what other native Apple technologies can help with network security? This brings us to our final area of Apple technologies that can be managed with Jamf. While the question here is overly broad in nature, organizations we work with have a number of needs to solve. Schools have compliance needs for network filtering to protect students, and enterprise devices may also have similar needs, albeit for different underlying reasons and regulation purposes. Well, the following types of Apple technologies may not route network traffic from remote users through your internal network. These can assist in defining where and what devices can access through the network, which may be equally or more important for your needs. Things like web content filter, plugins that can be installed on iOS and macOS managed by MDM, system extensions, specifically the network extension type introduced in macOS Catalina, and then other types of proxies and DNS proxy and DNS encryption. Simply being able to secure and manage those requests of how devices are resolving domain names, keeping your organization's information private so devices on certain networks can't have their network requests monitored. So enterprise applications may also incorporate these payloads and leverage MDM and config profiles from Jamf to manage these settings over the air. With the deprecation of legacy kernel extensions on macOS, we're seeing more third-party security and VPN applications moving to these more modern frameworks from Apple, managed by Jamf. So, what did we learn? Well, I hope we learned a bit more about how Jamf can assist in deploying and configuring Apple devices to access your networks securely. There are a number of ways to do so, so bringing in your network teams and Jamf can help you get to where your organization needs to be, as well as simplifying things for your users. Of course, we encourage you to reach out to us so that we can work with you and the respective teams in deploying certificates within your environment. And with that, I'll say thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure today. And again, thanks for listening. We will email you when the recording is ready. And also, if you're ready to get started with Jamf, scan the QR code to get in touch with us. You can also reach us at info@jamf.com to get answers as well.